Hi everybody. I decided to do a cart ride in this beautiful place just myself because I thought it's such a great opportunity when I am in such a beautiful part of the world to talk a little bit about turfgrass. And it comes to the end of the year, and this year I have had a chance to travel all over and meet so many interesting people and see some really interesting turfgrass sites. And some things are on my mind that I thought I'll go ahead and share with you because I've had these conversations with people in different parts of the world at some of the conferences that I've spoken at. And of course, I learn when I'm having these conversations or when people ask me questions. I learn a lot, and it helps me to clarify how I understand things like MLSN or OM246 or clipping volume or that kind of thing. So one of the things that has surprised me is people from all around the world, even though this year is the 10-year anniversary of MLSN, that method for making fertilizer recommendations for turfgrass, even though we're in year 10 of MLSN, people still invite me to teach about it, to explain how they could make use of MLSN. So something that if I would just try to explain it in 1 minute, I would say, please think about MLSN not as a way to find the ideal amount of nutrients in the soil. And don't think about MLSN as a way to identify a deficiency. What MLSN is a way to find out how much fertilizer you need to supply to the grass for a given amount of time. And if you work through it, you can find out a very efficient amount of fertilizer that will guarantee that you have all the nutrients that the grass can use. And you don't have to worry about deficiency, and you don't have to worry about applying gross over application of nutrients. There's another thing about MLSN that I want to explain better next year, or I want to explain more next year, and that is that MLSN will not only tell you the minimum amount to apply, but also the maximum amount to apply. So I think people think of MLSN and clipping volume and OM246 as being a way to do the least possible, the least amount of fertilizer possible, grow the grass as slow as possible, apply the lowest amount of sand possible. But with all of these things, a lot of the things that I've been studying and researching and teaching about and writing about, I want to emphasize that if you're not putting enough fertilizer, MLSN will tell you that, and it will tell you that you need to put more. If you're not putting enough sand, I guarantee it that if you make some playability measurements and make some OM246 total organic material measurements, you will quickly find out that you're not applying enough sand top dressing. And the same thing with clipping volume. If you measure the clipping volume, and you will see that when the turf thins out and gets traffic damage, you will have a number that shows the grass is not growing fast enough. So it's not only about doing less. All of these things will also identify when you're not doing enough, when you're not putting enough fertilizer, not putting enough sand. You can use these tools to find what's going to work perfectly for your site and for the amount of traffic that you're having and for the type of weather that you're having at your site this day or this year. Something else that occurred to me this year is that the organic matter production below ground is actually measured. The amount of growth that the grass has below ground is measured by the OM246 testing from one date to the next. Just like the sum of clipping volume over time will tell you how much above ground growth there was by checking what the organic matter content was below ground at a known date, and then checking how much organic matter there is below ground at another date, and knowing how much sand was applied, you can calculate what the below ground organic matter production rate was also. So that's something that can be really, really useful in finding out how much sand needs to be applied and where. So I've been working on a lot of that stuff this year and keep thinking about it. And if you've listened or watched the ATC double cut, I've talked about or hinted at some of these things in some of those episodes. And I think you'll see coming up that I will continue to work on this and try to understand it a little bit better and try to be able to communicate it more clearly so that people can understand this. Something that I've been surprised by is that some people think that organic matter is like a cause of turfgrass problems. But if you test the soil organic matter or the soil organic material in different locations on a golf course, you'll find that the grass that's the best, the grass that is growing the healthiest and that has the fewest problems and is just the turf that you really like, that will be growing in soil that has more organic matter in it. And if you go to the absolute worst green that always has shade problems and that has algae and the turf doesn't grow so well, maybe there's moss, whatever. If you go to the area that has the bad growing environment, it turns out that that will have less organic matter in the soil. And that happens because the organic matter in the soil is not a cause of turfgrass problems, I don't think. It is the result of the biomass production of the grass. And that's something that when you do the testing, you find that out. And I've seen that so consistently from different countries around the world, different continents around the world, that I'm pretty sure that this is a fact. And so I would encourage you to be aware of that and to think about that, the more organic matter you can have, the better, so long as your playability is still all right. There's another thing that I've been thinking about kind of constantly, always in the background, and I haven't figured out exactly how to solve this problem yet or calculate the answer. But I have a suspicion that the amount of nitrogen that's applied produces more growth and more below ground organic material than we intuitively expect. And I hear people talking about, nitrogen application to turfgrass is something that goes in cycles. So if people are doing low, they'll say low nitrogen now. And people will say, we're doing low nitrogen now. Oh, that's just something that was from back in the 1980s. And then it goes in cycles, how much nitrogen gets applied. I don't really want to think about low nitrogen or high nitrogen. I want to think about the right amount of nitrogen to create the desired growth rate. And it's really interesting to look at the clipping volume that's produced for a given amount of nitrogen. So if you do that, you just end up putting the right amount of nitrogen, and you don't have to think, we're only putting 1.5 pounds of nitrogen, or 7.5, 8 grams of nitrogen per square meter, 70 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. That, whether that's low nitrogen or high nitrogen or the right amount of nitrogen, is kind of irrelevant to me to classify it as low or high. And what we want to do is have the right amount of nitrogen to produce the desired amount of clippings, the desired amount of above ground growth for a location, for that particular grass, for the desired surface that we need to produce. With clipping volume, you can look at how much expected clipping volume you can get from 1 unit of nitrogen. You can do the math and work backwards and figure that out. And if you do that, it turns out that you can produce quite a bit of clippings for a small amount of nitrogen. And so I know that above ground, we can produce quite a bit of clippings for a small amount of nitrogen. And I suspect that much of the historical problems that we've had with thatch in the turfgrass industry, the problems that we've had with having to put so much sand top dressing, the problems of having to do so much cultivation that's disruptive to perfect surfaces, all for the purposes of managing this thatch problem or managing all of this below ground organic material that gets produced. I think if we would cut the nitrogen rates just a little bit, we may find that we get enough above ground growth to produce the traffic recovery and the quality of the surface that we need without having too much excess below ground material produced. Now, that all sounds very simple, and it seems like we should have figured this out a long time ago. And it's not so innovative that I'm saying this, because it's all just very logical what I say. But it's something that's on my mind. It's always in the background, and I hope one of these days I will figure out how to make an estimate for how much below ground organic material gets produced for every unit of nitrogen that we apply to the turf. I usually don't just take a cart ride or make a cart ride video just with me, but I thought in this pretty place and as we come to the end of the year, I just wanted to have a chat with a few people who watch my videos or who follow what I'm doing, and I wanted to say thank you, and I hope you enjoy hearing about some of these things that I've been working on, and I want to say thanks for the people who invite me to visit turfgrass around the world, to speak at conferences around the world where I can learn so much. All of the Pace Turf subscribers who are able to access all of the information that's available from the Pace Turf site. Everybody who listens to my podcasts, watches my YouTube channel, reads the Asian Turfgrass Center blog, clients of ATC, all of our soil testing clients and other clients who make use of some of our advisory services from around the world. I want to say thank you so much, and I'm going to keep working on things that are exciting for me, and hopefully they're practical and will be helpful for you. So have a great end of the year and Happy New Year.